Well, welcome everyone to the Packstock 1 course in the Traditional Skills track. In this session, you'll be introduced to the capabilities of Packstock and their role in managing public lands. The Packers we have with us today will discuss safely working around stock, from horse psychology to some of the safety factors that Packers consider when they're putting together a string. I'm Togan Kaposa. I'm the acting Regional Wilderness and Wild Scenic Rivers Program Manager for the Pacific Southwest region. I'll be your course moderator today. Sarah Lang, who is the acting Wilderness and Wild and Scenic Rivers Program Assistant for the Pacific Southwest region, will be our Zoom host. Now I'd like to take a moment to introduce the Packers we have with us today. You'll see them throughout the video clips, and remember, they'll answer any questions you post to the chat. First, we have Ken Graves. Well, we have our Packers sharing screens today. We have Ken Graves and Katy Bartzokis there together. Ken Graves is the animal packer on the Shasta-Trinity National Forest, and he also serves the dual role of being the co-director for the Pacific Southwest Region Packstock Center of Excellence. With him is Katy Bartzokis. She's one of two lead animal packers for the Packstock Center of Excellence, and she's also located on the Shasta-Trinity National Forest. We also have Michael Morse and Debbie Mcdougald with us today. Debbie is the Special Uses Administrator and Stock Program Manager on the Sierra National Forest, and she also serves the dual role of being the Education Chair for the Packstock Center of Excellence. And finally, last but not least, we have Michael Morse. Michael is a Wilderness and Trails Manager on the Mammoth District of the Inyo National Forest, and he's the other co-director for the Packstock Center of Excellence for the Pacific Southwest region. So during our session today, we're going to begin with an introduction to Packstock for Public Lands narrated by Katy. Then we'll transition to a video about the U.S. Forest Service Pacific Southwest region's Packstock Center of Excellence. Next, we'll have a presentation about safety, which will serve as your safety orientation to working with Packstock. And finally, we'll conclude with a question and answer session. So with that, let's get started with our first presentation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Katy Bartzokis. I'm an animal packer on the Shasta-Trinity National Forest and also one of two lead packers for the Forest Service Packstock Center of Excellence here in California. This presentation is called Pack and Saddle Stock Essential Management Tools for America's Public Lands, and its purpose is to explain how these animals are used nationwide to manage both wilderness areas and other public lands. We're going to talk about where this tool is used, who is using it, the many different types of projects that horses and mules can help with, and why this is important for getting more work done on public lands. Hope you enjoy. So since this isn't the National Wilderness Skills Institute, we're going to start with the idea of packing as a traditional tool. It doesn't get much more traditional than this. People have been packing pretty much since animals were domesticated. A wide variety of animals have been used, not just horses, mules, and donkeys, but also camels. This picture is taken in Egypt in 1914. Yaks, oxen, llamas. There's a great tradition of llama packing in South America. Goats, basically, if it can be domesticated and is big enough to carry a pack, somebody has packed that animal. Also, I'm going to talk primarily about horses and mules as pack stock in this presentation because they are the most common in the United States. But I should mention that llamas are sometimes also used by the public land management agencies. So packing is a super old traditional tool, but it is still incredibly valuable today. If you take nothing else away from these presentations, I'd like you to go home thinking about how pack and saddle animals are a cost-effective way to increase our efficiency in getting work done on public lands. We're going to get back into this towards the end of the presentation, but I really want you all to start thinking about stock use through this lens. So where are stock being used for public lands management in the United States? Most commonly, stock are used in wilderness areas where the Wilderness Act specifically forbids the use of motorized or mechanized transport. Any living animal is neither of those, so it is very appropriate to use stock in wilderness areas. The picture in the background, if you don't recognize it, is of John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt, at the end of their pack trip through what is now Yosemite National Park. We can also use stock in non-wilderness areas that can't be accessed with a road, especially wilderness study areas, or often anywhere that the manager would prefer not to create a road, since stock doesn't have that kind of impact. Finally, I want to emphasize that there are leave no trace techniques for stock, just like all other outdoor activities, and that most modern equestrians take these really seriously. Backcountry Horsemen of America, which is a nationwide stock-based volunteer organization, has done a great job of educating stock users nationally on leave no trace techniques. From the government packer perspective, it's our job to take care of public lands. Here in Region 5, I think every single packer is a leave no trace master educator. And I think nationally what government packers are providing is a minimum impact tool for land management. So the next question is, who uses stock to manage public lands? This image is a map of all American public lands that are federally managed, made by USGS. And this image has in red all of the federal land management units that currently own pack or saddle animals that are actively being used for federal land management. It's actually a lot. All three of the federal agencies that manage the majority of public land, Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, and Park Service, are using these animals to some extent. Pretty common in the Forest Service, especially up and down the Continental Divide. There are two regional specialty pack strings that are different from the Center of Excellence that we have in Region 5. One is at the 9 Mile Wildlands Training Center in Region 1, and one is based on the Shoshone National Forest in Region 2. Lots of the national parks use pack and saddle animals: Yellowstone, Sequoia Kings, Yosemite, Rocky Mountain, Glacier, Olympic, and also several BLM districts, usually for range management purposes. Some of the more surprising places that have stock are the Hoosier National Forest and Great Smoky Mountains National Park in the east, and Volcanoes and Haleakala National Parks in Hawaii. Not on the map, there are a lot of stock-based volunteer and partnership groups out there working in the backcountry, of which Backcountry Horsemen is by far the largest. Horses are also often used for law enforcement on public lands, particularly by the Border Patrol in the Southwest and the Capitol Parks Police on the East Coast. A lot of state game management agencies use pack and saddle animals as well. And finally, range permittees, especially in the western states where we have a lot of public lands grazing, are often out taking care of their animals on their allotments horseback. So I made this map. This was by far the most research-intensive part of all these presentations, and I don't think anyone else has tried to do this recently. I also probably got at least a few things wrong, so if your unit is incorrectly represented on here, please send me a message and I'll fix it for future presentations. My email is there at the bottom of the screen, and it will be on the last slide as well. So the big takeaway from this slide is that this is more common than you think, and that if you have a project where you think stock would be useful, there's probably someone around that can help you with that. So how are stock used to manage public lands? Before we delve into the specific ways that we use the animals, I want to bring up a few points to keep in mind that apply to almost everything we're doing with the horses and mules. We are almost always cheaper than helicopters. That's a big one. Stock use has no impact on wilderness character. Having pack stock available often attracts volunteer and partnership labor. You can get a lot more work done in wilderness if you can pack some of these groups in. And it makes these trips really attractive to people because they get to spend time in really remote, special places while they're working. Finally, the value of packing services can be used as an agency match for grant funding. So keep all that in mind, and we're going to delve into some of the specific ways that pack and saddle stock are used for public lands management. This basically falls into 5 main categories: transporting materials, supporting crews, rangers, resource specialists, or anyone else working in the backcountry, trash removal, other horseback work, that is to say things that are more efficient horseback than afoot. Finally, horses and mules are often used to support fire-related activities in the backcountry. So the first thing stock are used for is transporting materials. So some of the things that often need to be packed are lumber, gravel, posts, wire, concrete, pipe, culverts, geotextiles, troughs, explosives, windows, furniture, herbicides, fish, beavers, lots of things go in on mules and horses. That's a string of mules with lumber in the picture. The boards on the first mule are 16 feet long. That's a really big mule, but it is possible to pack a lot of different things on mules. There are some limitations based on where you have to go, the terrain, the trail, but there's a lot of stuff that can get transported this way. Here are just a few more pictures of weird stuff that's been packed. There's some T-posts on the left, windows on the bottom, and on the top is Ivan the mule with a California Fish and Game warden holding a bag of fish that Ivan carried in and were being planted in the lake that's in the background. Ivan's in my string. He's kind of a local celebrity here in Trinity County. He has a children's book written about him, and he made himself his own Facebook page, both of which you can find if you Google Ivan the Trinity Alps Pack Mule. So moving on to the next category of work, I really want to emphasize how using animals to do the hard manual labor really conserves the energy of personnel and crews working in the backcountry and really allows them to get more work done when they get where they're going. Obviously, this applies to transporting materials like we talked about in the last slide, but often the equipment that people need to do work in these remote areas is also pretty cumbersome. So this would be things like camp gear, saws, tools of all kinds, power tools and generators, boats, electrofishing equipment and nets, screens for archaeology, transporting scientific samples out of the backcountry, etc. Another example of letting mules do the hard work is using animals that are broke to drive, which means work under harness to pull things around. Typically this means wagons, but in the wilderness it often means pulling a stone boat or skidding logs around or pulling a trail plow to work on tread really efficiently. Another thing that often gets lost in this discussion is that using stock to transport equipment can help prevent people from shortchanging themselves on things that they need. For example, if you are on a trail crew and you are doing tread work and you hiked in backpacking style, maybe you only brought a shovel because it's versatile and you are also going to clean some fire rings. But let's say you got packed in, you could have a shovel and a Mcdougald and a pick for your tread work depending on what the ground is like, and having the right tool for what you're working on is going to make you much faster and more efficient in what you're doing. As another example, in California we work a lot with the California Conservation Corps, which contracts 20-person backcountry trail crews to the Forest Service and Park Service. Once those crews go into the backcountry, they stay there all summer. They don't come out. They're doing hard physical labor, burning up to 4,000, 5,000 calories a day. And in order to sustain that level of performance all summer, they need good nutrition in their food, high protein, vitamins. And so we pack them good food, and that allows them to maintain a high level of productivity throughout the season because their bodies aren't breaking down. One of the least glamorous but very common jobs that we use stock for is trash removal. Dump sites, abandoned camps, grow sites, human waste in highly trafficked areas where that is exceeding a level that the environment can absorb, removal of old fence. There's an amazing amount of trash in the woods. The picture on the right is an entire string of trash from a squatter's camp. The dirt bike, somebody rode it in, the engine blew up, they abandoned it, and that came out on a mule too. We do this all the time. Beyond just transporting things, there are a lot of jobs that can be accomplished more efficiently using stock as you go. You can cover long distances faster with less effort. They're great for certain types of monitoring in horse-accessible country, especially for range management, checking and fixing fence. We find them very efficient for small logout trips, as you can see in the picture. You can cover a ton of ground and you aren't slowed down by carrying your tools. There are some wilderness rangers horseback, quite a bit of law enforcement activity horseback. Horses and mules are also great ambassadors for the public lands agencies to the public, whether that's visitor contacts on the trail or community events like parades or visiting schools, career day type events. People love to meet these animals, and beyond how charismatic they can be, I think that people like them so much because they visually represent personnel from the land management agencies being out in the wilderness getting work done. So the last major area where we use horses and mules is for fire support. We seem to do this a lot in California because our entire state seems to be on fire every year. I know this goes on in other regions as well. As far as resupplying crews that are spiked out in remote areas, mules take a lot longer than helicopters to get somewhere, but they're much more reliable. We work closely with helicopters throughout the fire season, and stock are just another tool in the fire management toolbox. We can go even when helicopters are grounded by smoke. We get a lot of inversions on fires out here in Northern California, and so that becomes really important. Once we get going, we are not usually diverted for other missions once we're all loaded and heading down the trail, which is often not the case with helicopters. Using mules instead of helicopters saves a phenomenal amount of money. Here in Region 5, we saved over $1 million to the taxpayer in the 2020 fire season by resupplying backcountry fire crews with stock. Using stock to do scheduled resupplies also reduces the exposure to risk for the helitack crews working a fire, just by reducing their time potentially in the air. Finally, using mules to deliver a scheduled resupply to crews frees up helicopters to do things only they can do, like bucket drops or IR flights. As far as minimum impact suppression tactics go for wilderness areas, bucket drops are one of the lowest impact tactics that we have, so it's definitely a benefit to be able to use that tool more. Additionally, pack strings can backhaul on every trip, minimizing the amount of trips to support a crew and increasing efficiency. Finally, at least here in California, most of the packers are also wilderness reefs, and all of us are Leave No Trace Master Educators, so we can be doing more than one thing out there and really help to minimize the impact of the fire crews that are working in the backcountry. So to close this presentation out, I want to return to the question of who uses stock to manage public lands, and I'm going to tell a story that I hope illustrates something. This picture is of Hector, who was an SCA crew member on a crew that we packed for on the BLM Applegate district outside of Alturas, California last summer, who is pictured with one of my favorite mules, who is coincidentally also named Hector. Now, Hector the human had never been around mules prior to this project, but he sure appreciated having Hector, the mule, and the rest of the string pack in about 3,400 pounds of wire and T-posts instead of his crew having to carry them. Hector the human was a super hard worker, and we really had fun working with him and his crew on this project. I love this picture, and I think both Hectors were having fun. I'm not sure where Hector the human is now, but if he's still working in public lands, I hope he remembers the mules and tells other people about them and what they were able to do on this project. So in closing, I want to leave you with this point. There is somewhat of a narrative that stock use for land management has been shrinking in the modern era of the Forest Service, and this obviously has happened to some extent. Now, the traditional explanation for this is that the old packers were retiring, the skill set was being lost from the agencies, and no one was learning the trade, which takes years and years to master. However, I'm going to challenge that narrative. I'm 29 years old. I've been packing for the Forest Service, or BLM, since I was 18, and I intend to keep doing this for the rest of my career. And I know a bunch of other packers that aren't old yet and intend to do the same thing, and we are all getting better at it every day we go to work. So instead, I would argue that the biggest threat to stock programs in the public lands agencies is actually not so much the attrition of packers, it's the attrition of other people who work for the public lands agencies and our partners that understand why stock are valuable and how they can be used to get work done in these wilderness and other remote areas. In an increasingly urban world, most people aren't around livestock growing up and aren't really familiar with how they're used. Lots of people, even within the agencies, aren't really even aware that pack stock are a tool that they have available to them. So my hope with these presentations, and a big part of why I agreed to do this, is that every one of you watching this will now be a part of the group of wilderness managers and stewards who understand why these animals are important and hopefully educate and pass this on to other people that you work with.
Great. Thanks so much, Katy, for that very, very informative overview. And now we'll transition to a video about the Region 5 Pack Stock Center of Excellence, so we can learn a little bit more about the center's work.
Started in 1977, still going at it, somewhere around, 43 years or something like that now. It was going to be a 3-month job packing stuff to the lookout, so be careful what job you take for the summer, because I'm still here.
Horsemanship and packing is part of our agency's identity, part of our culture, and it's a safe and practical tool that should be continued to use into the future.
We're all really proud of the tradition, and I think it's great, and I think it's a really cool history, but that's not why we're here. We're here because it works.
I started out and am still working in what's called the Yolobola Wilderness. It was set aside as a primitive area way before the '64 Wilderness Act.
The Wilderness Act decreed certain areas of public land would be preserved and protected with minimal human impact.
The Wilderness Act prohibits mechanized transportation. It's not just non-motorized, it's not mechanical. So no bicycles, technically no wheelbarrows.
The only way that they can get that equipment, the tools to do the job that we've asked them to do or hired them to do, is by putting it on mules and carrying it into the backcountry.
The Alps is huge. It's 500,000 acres and it's round. And so to get to the middle with a load of stuff could be days of hiking.
It's either carry it or drag it is the two ways. And we're not dragging it, and it's too heavy for me to carry, so we put it on these mules.
Packing provides the material support for the various crews and individuals working in wilderness or other roadless areas.
Packing involves the support of a crew that we designated to do a specific job in the mountains, in the wilderness. They could be back 5 miles, they could be back 15 miles.
What we call a string is a group of mules, and it's how we tie them together. The mules learn to work in a unit. A string can be 2 mules to 20, 50 mules.
Most mules carry 150 to 175 pounds, and so it's quite a campaign when you do it. But the productivity of what goes on in the backcountry is at a much higher level.
Despite growing demands, the shrinking budgets put the pack stock program at risk.
We were just about gone, and we had a meeting with all the stock people in the region. And I think there was 17 of us that had anything to do with stock in the whole region. The next year, there was about 9. It was going downhill that fast.
A lot of the people in the past that knew what pack stock was all about were retiring. Michael and I started talking about this need to become a viable part of the Forest Service and to maintain the stock programs.
We were at a point in our history that I felt that if we didn't do something new, that we became more of a tool that could be utilized for all kinds of different things, we were going to be extinct in no time. So then we came up with the idea of the Center of Excellence.
The Region 5 Pack Stock Center of Excellence is an innovative program that honors Forest Service tradition while addressing current and future needs.
The reason why we are called the Center of Excellence is not that we are going forth and being excellent every day, it's that we are always trying to be better, and we're always trying to provide the best and most excellent program that the region can have in support of all the activities that the Forest Service does.
The big part of the district packer's job here, it always has been, was basically to cut logs out and keep trails open. You can't get access for any of the surveys that the sciences do, fires, it all kind of hangs on that access.
Our largest thing that we support is trails, but we've worked with almost every specialty in the Forest Service.
Currently in the center, we're available for anybody and everybody in the region.
We support a lot of monitoring ecosystem work, rehab projects, fisheries, fires, archaeology, hydrology, botany, law enforcement, you name it.
Everybody you pack needs camp gear, so that's kind of universal. Tents and kitchens.
Their tools, their groceries.
Meat and coolers, 12 dozen eggs, a whole box of apples, a whole box of oranges.
Fire crews have their whole own rigmarole that goes with them. Mostly heavy tools and awkward stuff.
Picks and shovels, rock bars.
Heavy metal pumps, hose, pipe.
Fuel, gasoline, propane cylinders, racks that are designated to haul water,
There's never enough water and Gatorade on a fire. The science crews, they have different equipment.
radio, repeaters, solar panels, 14-foot timbers, planking and bridge material.
Metal roofing, windows. It's a surprise every day.
What makes this job interesting to me is it's a new day every day.
2 years ago, we packed cutthroat trout out of the back of a mountain.
Sometimes it's not a thing you took in there and it has to come out.
So we'd cut the trail open and then take the trash out with us.
I don't think people realize how much we actually use pack stock, not only in this region, but across the nation.
We're not just Region 5, we do a lot of activity elsewhere. We help nonprofit organizations. We've always supported the California Conservation Corps. We've supported the Backcountry Horsemen. We help CDF, BLM. We work with Fish and Wildlife Services. And we developed our horsemanship safety classes that takes it from the anatomy of the animal all the way to how to put a saddle on, because the most important thing was how to be safe around these animals.
There's all of these people that we're supporting, but we also do a lot of community outreach. I mean, locally here in Weaverville, we do Frontier Days, we do the 4th of July Parade.
Mule Days and helping to teach young kids under the program of Want to Be a Packer, helping schools learn things about packing in the Forest Service.
A couple times we've done the Rose Parade.
The Rose Parade had almost 1 million people watch it in person and 27 million people watch it on TV, and that was part of the celebration of Smokey's 75th birthday.
The pack strings are a well-known public face of the Forest Service. Probably one of the Forest Service best ambassadors.
The pack stock program and the Forest Service mule is one of the best promotional public interaction things we have other than Smokey the Bear. It's hard to compete with Smokey, but you put the mule and Smokey together and you have a winning combination.
Increasingly, pack stock is becoming an important tool for fire management.
We rely on pack stock regularly on a yearly basis. We get lots and lots of fires in the backcountry, and more we're choosing to not aggressively suppress them and manage them, so we need to set up backcountry spike camps and support those camps with firefighters and food and provisions and supplies to effectively manage those fires.
The pack stock is a tool for the firefighters. It's a tool in their toolbox.
If there's a benefit of time to respond to a fire and we can use pack stock in the wilderness, it has proven to be much more cost effective than running helicopters.
We kind of work in good conjunction with helicopters, but the hourly cost of a helicopter is higher than our whole daily cost for a pack string.
Everybody realizes we both complement each other. That helicopter can be across the canyon over there in 15 minutes and have stuff delivered where it might take us all day long to get over there. But we can go when they can't fly, and we can go on missions that are way less critical, and they can be gone doing something else.
One of the things that the Center of Excellence did really well was it kind of made us all a team.
Through this process of trying to survive, we all started helping each other.
The concept of one region, one program of work, I think we're ahead of the curve on that one.
Increasingly, the Forest Service is relying on partnerships and the idea of shared stewardship to effectively care for our public lands.
There's a huge amount of trails and country out there, and there's 20 of us left in the region. And we could nowhere near do it all, but we can do a lot more by packing in those partnerships and volunteer crews.
We've been sending crews here to the Shasta-Trinity National Forest for over 35 years. Basically, we hire around 92 18 to 26-year-olds. We place them on 6 different crews, and they spend 5.5 continuous months living and working in these remote wilderness locations, focusing on trail repair, trail maintenance for public lands.
And so it's an immersive program. We lived and worked there the whole time, and our resupplies were delivered by mules every week or every 2 weeks throughout that whole summer. The adjustment into that work was pretty rough. But after a few weeks, it really hooked me in. And obviously here, I'm sitting here nearly 20 years later and providing that experience for more young adults.
We help them steward the public lands. We help maintain the trails so they're safer, more accessible for the public. And it's a great pipeline for their future employees.
A fundamental focus of the Center of Excellence is mentorship.
One of the greatest things that the center has enabled us to do is train the next generation of stock people and packers.
I mean this in the best possible way, but there is no one harder to work for than Lee. because he is such a perfectionist isn't really the right word. He's just meticulous about every single detail, and there's a reason why every single detail happens the way it does, and that's what makes him so good at what he does. But it's overwhelming, especially when you start working there.
There's the basic principles, the basic functions of doing the job and how you go about it, but it's the nuances that make the difference between a safe and efficient organization, and that's part of the skill set we're trying to build into the center.
You're learning how to tie the knots, you're learning the first aid, you're learning shoeing, you're learning all the things that goes with just basic taking care of the mules. You're also learning the country, you're learning the weather, you're learning the trail conditions. All of those things are part of safely getting through the mountains with a string of mules.
I've learned a tremendous amount. The importance of mentors is, something that sometimes gets overlooked, and having mentors to work with on a daily basis in such a specific trade is invaluable.
The Center of Excellence is part of the Forest Service's history and its future.
As long as we have public lands and wild open spaces that people value, the need for that work is never going to go away. And it's not history. It's not just romance. It's how you get the job done,
I feel like we spend a majority of our time feeling like we are productively doing something to better manage America's public lands.
If we're truly to care about this place and for future generations, we must rely on some of these traditional basic practices that have proven to be so effective over time.
We couldn't do our jobs if the U.S. Forest Service packers weren't doing their jobs.
The center has been incredible to me, and I want to continue to be a part of it.
To keep it going, it's going to need the support of the region and the support of the agency as a whole. And I think it provides a service that once gone will never come back.
Great. Thank you to the Packstock Center of Excellence for this video. It really helps highlight all of the many ways stock can support our work in wilderness. Now we're going to transition to our final presentation, which is a Packstock safety orientation. And then, of course, we'll have some time for questions and answers.
Hello, my name's Ken Graves. I'm on the Shasta-Trinity National Forest. I've been a packer here for over 40 years. This is our first time not doing this kind of a training in person and doing it on video. This is basically an overview of stuff. We in no way expect anybody to become a packer off of these videos. The main thing is to give you an overview on safety and an idea of things that you may encounter out there. The main thing in all things that we do with stock is being safe.
If I come up and thank the mules for all their work.
Let me untie them first. They're all tied together. They might wipe you out. Let me get them untied and then you can come up and... Okay, Eric, if you come up to the horse right by the shoulder, talk to her as you're coming up and pet her kind of right there.
There you go, horse.
That way she knows where you're at and you're in kind of a neutral position there. If you're up too far to the front, they pull back. If you're too far to the back, they jump ahead.
Okay, well, thanks for letting me come up and say hi to her.
You bet. And thank you for all the work you guys have done. And yeah, if you get in the middle of these strings when they're tied together, they can take your head off with all the lead ropes coming running around you.
I see what you mean. Glad I asked first.
Yep. All right, have a great day. Thanks for all the work. I think the number one thing that we ought to say to everybody that's working around stock is make sure to talk to the person that's in charge of the stock and do what they say. They have the best knowledge of these animals' attitudes and personalities, a lot better than somebody that's just walking up out of the blue, and they will keep you out of trouble if you listen to them.
But one thing that remains constant with all these animals is they're all prey animals. Horse, mule, donkey, any other animal that, a llama, whatever animal's got a pack on his back, that's a prey animal. And so you are dealing with an animal that is afraid. He's going to get eaten someday. His whole life is built on avoiding that scenario. We come up and present ourselves to these animals. We don't want to make them think we're one of those predators that's going to get them. And so you can build a relationship with a horse or a mule, and they'll learn to respect you, and I'm not sure they won't even get to be where they consider you somewhat of a friend, but they always are going to view a human as a potential predator. You could spend a lifetime with a horse or a mule, have the best, long working relationship with them, and as a human you could blow that whole thing out of the water and never get it back in just a couple of minutes if you want to. And so you have to really always be thinking about how you're dealing with these guys. So how you approach a horse or a mule has a lot to do with their first thought of it. If you run straight up at the front of this animal, it's probably going to kind of scoot backward. If it's tied up to a trailer, what's going to happen then, you're going to have a tight rope. This pressure on the back of the head might set him off further yet. Panic ensues, perhaps a halter breaks, perhaps a horse's back leg slips out from underneath him and he ends up on the ground, tied tight, all bad stuff. Potentially hurting the horse, definitely potentially hurting you, tearing up gear. And the next time that horse is tied up, he's going to probably remember that. And if he gets that tight rope, it's probably going to happen again. So these things, the more you can avoid them, the better. Now on the other hand, run up from behind, and what do you think this horse is going to think? Something's coming after me. He's going to go that way. So maybe you're on a trail and you're hiking, and the pack string's up there and not moving as fast as you are. I've had trail joggers, trail runners, and bicyclers both come up behind me in a big hurry as well, and they're kind of silent missile of death to a horse. And so the whole string can turn into, like that quick, a big runaway train. Coming up too fast from either side is not only risky to you, because if I'm going to run away from a big mean predator and I'm this horse, what's probably the last thing I'm going to send him on my way out the door? A double barrel kick. And so you could really get hurt there. By the same token, if I run up to the front of this horse and he's tied there and he sets back like we talked, but nothing breaks, he's got to give, something's got to give. He's going to jump forward, and if he jumps forward and I'm standing right here and I'm in between this trailer, I'm going to get smashed. And so either way you do it, your best bet on approaching these animals is really right in this middle zone. This is kind of where it's sort of a neutral zone. They don't feel as threatened by what you're doing. You don't want to move fast. You're throwing your hands around a lot, making a bunch of racket, yelling, sharp noises like squealing or screaming, dogs barking, all that stuff. They get used to it and have to deal with it in life, but if we, as the person around the stock, can do our part to not contribute to that, it's a big help. So also remember with these guys that they can kind of get tired and fall asleep, and so you can startle them. And again, their whole thought process is, I'm probably going to get eaten someday if I don't keep myself aware. And so maybe they get tired after a long trip and doze off. Don't you think that looks like what Yellow's doing right now? See those eyes just kind of closing slow. So this would be a pretty good time to run up and startle her if I wanted to. And again, first reaction to a prey animal when they're startled is get away fast. And I'll look at whatever startled me from over there somewhere where it can't hurt me. And so at that point in time, you've started another problem just because you startled this horse. And so just think like a horse. Remember, you don't need to be afraid of them, nervous about them all the time, but they're big and they're strong. Typically, they're gentle-natured. Even rowdy, rambunctious horses, mules that don't act real good a lot of the time, very seldom actually mean. A lot of times there's other reasons why they act that way, but mean is typically not a good word that's going to describe most horses and mules. So that's a good thing, but at the same token, We don't want to forget that even though they're good, gentle animals, they're always looking for a reason to get startled. And so the more we can do to prevent that, the better. And so as you interact with different animals, you get a better sense of just, being able to kind of read the horse's personality or the mule as you walk up to it. But no matter what you think about that horse, if the packer or the owner is standing right over there, they know. And that's the person you really want to talk to about it. Pack string coming! Over here? Perfect. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Step up. Pay attention, boys. Just keep talking as we go by if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. Hey, that's the deal. Good job.
Step up, boys. Have a great day.
Yeah, same to you. Thank you.
When pedestrians and equestrians meet on the trail, hikers should yield to horses because they are much more agile and create less impact when leaving the trail corridor. Here are some of the specific things Eric and Ken are doing to make this interaction safe for both people and stock. First, Eric warns the rest of the trail crew that a string is coming. Next, he picks up all his equipment and gear and takes it with him to the downhill side of the trail. He stands in plain sight 10 feet off the trail and asks Ken if he is in a safe spot for Ken to pass. Ken and his string waited for Eric and his crew to safely move off the trail. As Ken passes, they continue talking to each other so that the mules know where Eric is.
Everybody pay attention. Step up. Step up.
Safe travel with a pack string requires good trail maintenance. Tread should be a minimum of 12 to 18 inches wide and should be full bench construction. Turns and switchbacks should have a minimum radius of 4 feet to accommodate the length of an equine. Clearing height should be a minimum of 10 feet. Low-hanging branches are dangerous because they can knock a rider off their horse. The trail should be cleared to a minimum of 6 feet wide at shoulder height to accommodate the width of packs. In particular, solid protrusions on the uphill side of the trail are dangerous because they can knock a loaded pack mule off the trail. In steep terrain, the tread may need to be substantially wider to create adequate clearance for the mules at shoulder height.
Going to go through the packer personnel safety stuff real quick, and then we'll go to the stock and string safety. And again, it'll be a kind of a quick overview of stuff, but it will definitely give people some ideas on things. Number one principle in Leave No Trace is plan ahead and prepare. If you can do that as much as you can, you'll save yourself all kinds of headaches in everything you're doing, but especially with the string. So number one safety thing is safety for yourself. If you're not in a safe situation or able to keep going, your stock is probably going to be in trouble also. And so the packer's number one job is taking care of that stock and getting the payloads in, and he can't do that if he's wiped out. So a lot of the things that are normal for everybody, rain gear, drinking water, personal items and stuff, is very important to have along. You don't want to overload your horses and your stock, but you want to have the stuff along that makes you continue to be safe. Saddlebags, which we'll show you where we want to put them a little bit later, but have the stuff that you need that you can get to and hurry in them. IME firm believer in gloves for pack strings. The number one thing you don't want to let happen is your pack string get away from you, and gloves can help you hang on to things a little longer. Footwear, very important. You want to have something that won't get hung up in your stirrups when you're getting on and off, but that you can get off and walk on. Lace-up packers are good, cowboy boots are good. Have something though that's not slick-soled, that as soon as you hit the pine needles you're on your hind end and sliding underneath the stock or something. So, like I said, sometimes it's a little tiny things that get you. People can or do not have to wear spurs. It's everybody's choice and the animals they got. But like I said earlier, sometimes it's the little things. Both of these are sets of my spurs. If you notice, this has a little tiny short shank that stays up high. This has a long shank. The reason I wear these way more in the mountains is because when I have to get off and run through the country, these guys here catch sticks and trip me, where the short ones don't hang up on things so much. And sometimes you got to get off and run in a hurry someplace to fix something, and just that little tiny thing right there can save you a whole lot of safety issues. These are two different styles of chaps, which were protective leggings. These are short. They're great for hot country. They don't protect your legs so far down on the sides. These are hot, but they protect your legs all the way down. Just kind of depends on your preference. Good gear, it doesn't have to be brand new, just in good condition is really important in this game. Along with that being said, really nice gear is nice to look at and is good to have under certain circumstances, but with a pack string, you probably want to have functional and not really expensive stuff, because it's probably going to get hurt. Either a mule's going to chew on it, or it's going to get caught on something and broke. You want to have more basic stuff and really good stout stuff. This old set here, like a lot of our gear, we talked earlier about these Salmon River saddles that were a lot of them real old. These chaps my dad wore for about 20 years, and then I've worn them for about 15. They're retired now, but that's how long that good gear lasts. After all of the issues that the packer has to think about and deal about, then comes the stock. Really good, gentle stock is highly, highly desired. Good packers, good horsemen can get by with rough stock. Some packers can get by with really rough stock, but it's not a place that somebody wants to start. You want to start with stuff that's calm if you can, and hopefully the rough stock turns into something like these guys that stand nice and calm for you. It is really, really desirable to have a lead animal that you're riding on, whether it's a horse or a mule, that has a really good handle on it, that has a really good stop and a really good go. You're going to need both of those. And the other thing they need to be able to do is turn around in tight places on the trails. Sometimes everything is going along good and you think the trail is really good, and you come around the turn and there's a tree fell across in a place where there's not room to hardly turn around, and everybody's got to turn around and go back or around or something. And so it's really important to have stock that's under control for yourself and for their safety. So having a nice long lead rope so that you can tie up off the trail if you have to. Your horse may have to stay standing on that trail, but there might not be anything to tie up to within who knows how far. And so longer lead ropes compared to shorter ones are highly more desired as far as I'm concerned. Breast collars, pretty darn important. Horses climbing uphill, keeping the saddle from sliding back. Having a good saddle, you can tell this saddle's not new, but it's a good saddle and it's comfortable to be in all day long. Really important. Nice new saddles are good as long as they fit you and the horse. When we're packing, we're going a long ways, sometimes maybe a mile or two, sometimes maybe 20 miles in a day, and we want to be able to sit in that thing and not be wiped out for a week after we've done it for a day, and we don't want our horses or mules wiped out either. You want to have a bit, and I'm not recommending any kind of bits. All I'm recommending is one that will get your horse or mule to stop when you want them to stop. So after the packer and his brain and all the things he has to think about, and the lead animal that he's riding, which are the two most important things in my opinion, the next important thing is the animal that they're leading, that is leading the string. And the reason that's important is that's what the packer's going to be hanging on to, and hopefully keeps hanging on to. They kind of set the attitude for the whole rest of the string. If they will come ahead, lead up good, and go ahead, most of the time, the rest of the mules will follow them. And if you have a good one that leads right up, first of all, the arm that you're leading with won't be 6 inches longer because they're always pulling back. And number two, everybody else will say, ah, they made it through, we can make it, and along they'll come. So they're real important. And I prefer to have a big, stout horse with an attitude that I'm riding, and a big, stout animal with an attitude, a good attitude that I'm leading. Just because if everything goes totally wrong behind them, they're big enough to pull everything else through if they have to. The little guys, some of them, I've had some really good lead pack animals that were little, and it's the attitude that got them through. But if you got the size, everything else is probably going to come along. So they're very important, and it can be, I've had really good horses and really bad horses. I've had really good mules and really bad mules. I've always been asked what's better. I've had pack animals that are horses that are just as good as any mules that I've had. And this mule here has been a really nice riding mule. She's been to the Rose Parade as a pack animal and as a riding animal, and she's good. So I would say there's good in all breeds and there's bad in all breeds. Like we talked about earlier, really good gear. Trying to have the best gear you can. You can't always have everything perfect or everything new, so you kind of have to deal with what you got. But having it in good shape as best as you can have it will save you a lot of trouble down the road. This is a quick deal here on the Salmon River saddle. We were lucky enough to get a bunch of new ones a while back, so we got pretty nice gear here to show you. We're going to string up now and put some loads on, and then show you kind of some issues with the string and how things should go, and talk about how they could go wrong. They call it a pack string or a pack train because they kind of act like a big train, and if everything is working good, they start out smooth and they all travel in a line, and they stay in a line and everybody works good, and they travel smooth, they slow down smooth. If something's not going right or one of the animals are not of that attitude, it can be a long, bad day. And so you try to have everything worked out as good as you can. One of your biggest safety issues is getting everything worked out at home, in an arena, or wherever before you take off to the mountains to go do something. So we're now talking about stringing a string together, a string of mules, which means that's more than one. And every time, I like to think in my brain, every time I add a mule back behind on the string, I'm doubling things that can go wrong. So by the time you get a few tied together, you got a few things that can go wrong. When I was talking about animals standing quietly, this is how important this is here. You notice this mule's wanting to come ahead a little bit. They're all kind of wanting to get away from each other. But this is where they can knock your loads on. Everything's tied on and it's really nice and pretty and balanced. But all it takes is one mule running into the other one and shoving a load over, and you might have to start all over again. So quiet stand and stock is really important. I'm going to ease in here and get this string now and show you. We'll tie up to this one. So instead of having one lead animal, pack animal, we're going to have 4, and they're all going to be tied together. And so I'm going to sneak around here and get that. I'll be right back. Okay, you notice how these mules are staying in line, working around. These guys just came off a pasture yesterday, They've only been tied together for about 200 yards up the road. Tie on up here to what we call the breakaway. This is the emergency ejection system here. If everything goes wrong, hopefully not everybody is going down with the ship. If something gets real bad, this is designed to break away. And then you kind of regroup and put things back together. And get this string of mules by myself, go off. If you've got people helping, that's great, but a lot of times you're by yourself. So we're going to try to stay within the camera. This is now a pack train. These guys, like I said, have only been together just a little while. This is 200 yards up to here, and this is the first time they've been strung together this year. But they've done this a whole lot, and they're good at it. This is what you want to have when you're out there on the trail. You never know what you're going to run into. See how they're kind of moving side by side. You can switch around and work off of each other. If you get the lead ropes too long, you got a wreck going on. You got a foot underneath it, over it. If you get it too short, they're stepping on each other, and pretty soon they're all mad. So you kind of got to figure out what works, and every animal is a little bit different. So you kind of got to give some a little shorter and some a little longer. As you can see, once you get this loaded up and going, you want to go as far as you can go to camp without ever stopping. Hopefully you can go all the way to camp without stopping and taking a load off or dealing with any issues. That's why it's so important, especially when you're by yourself, to do that plan ahead and prepare and try to figure out everything that could go wrong and fix it ahead of time.
Thank you to our packers for a great orientation to working safely around stock. As you know, we're fortunate to have several of them in the room with us today. I'll ask that they turn on their cameras, and we'll transition to a live question and answer session. I'll go ahead and start it off. We've heard throughout the presentations today about all of the many ways pack strings can be used for units that may not have a local pack string. What are resources that are available to develop a new stock program or just to get stock support for a local project? Does one of you want to take that? Michael, shall I pass it to you first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The general way that we acquire, I'd say, packing requests is annual meeting every year in the fall. But prior to that, we do reach out to most of the forest and ask them if they have any immediate need or are looking at any immediate need in the future for pack support to maybe support a trail crew or any type of project they may have coming up. It could be anything from hauling material into the backcountry for a bridge project, or it could be fence material or whatever. If you go on the R5 Center of Excellence website, there's a request form in there. And you can pretty much, if you can get that form in sometime by November, we'd like them in by November 15th, then the board of directors, when they meet, usually in the fall or early the following year, will go through those request forms and we'll select the ones that we believe we can do. We'll also contact the party that requested it to get a little more oversight of the project. And then that discussion will be carried through the board of directors, who will then vote on it, whether or not it's an acceptable project. If it's accepted, then we'll contact the forest back, and then we'll start working on logistical requirements to maybe be on that forest at what time of year that's going to be best for all of us. And it's not uncommon to get a lot of requests every year. We just recently finished 2 projects on the Los Padres National Forest that we're done in the month of March and April, which is ideal for us here on the South Zone because we're not in our heaviest part of our operating season.
Great, thanks, Michael. And Katie, did you want to add?
Yeah, I did. For those of you outside of Region 5, Region 2 and Region 1 both have programs pretty similar to ours that have the ability to travel to different forests. So in Region 1, that would be the Northern Region Pack Train based on the Lolo National Forest. And then in Region 2, I believe they have a specialty string that's now based on the Shoshone. So that would, and I think that's out of Katy. So if you're in a different part of the country, that might be a good place to look to find basically packing services near you. Also, all of our emails, I think, are at the beginning of the chat, or you can find them in the Forest Service system. And feel free to reach out to us directly as well.
Great, thanks, Katie. It looks like we had a question come into the chat from Kip. He says, considering how hard it must be to schedule summer projects and have capacity to support fires, is there a lot of need for more pack stock on fires? A lot more need than we've been able to provide so far.
Yeah, I'll throw something out at that. Yes, it's something that we have hard time considering every year because we never know what year is going to be a high year in the wilderness areas, which is where we're usually at. And then we have an increasing amount of work that's non-fire related going on and trail stuff. So yes, that's a really big balancing thing that kind of gets bigger every year to be able to do both and have enough to be able to do both. Sometimes we have to trade off and try to find some contract packers to either take on our work so we can go to the fires or possibly get contract stuff to go to the fires. So yes, that's a great question. And we're constantly working on that one.
Great, thanks, Ken. We've had another question come in the chat. Sarah asks, could you elaborate on what kinds of projects are not acceptable for stock? What are the factors you look at when making a determination about what projects are viable?
I guess, kind of the biggest questions for us would be access and materials. So how can we get to the trailhead? Can we get our stock from the trailhead to the project site? Like, is the trail safe for our stock? And that's something we can always, help you determine before our project starts. A lot of the time we'll even go take a saddle animal and go scout the trail and just determine if there are maintenance needs that need to happen. And then the other half of that is materials. Is this something that's reasonable to put on stock, or do you need a helicopter? If, it's 30-foot bridge stringers that weigh 700 pounds, that can't go on a mule. So that might be an appropriate time to figure out another way to get that in there. There's a lot of these bridge kits now, though, that come apart and bolt together. So just kind of trying to determine, if you do want to use pack stock, how to make the materials compatible with that.
Great, thanks, Katie. So as we were watching the presentations, we heard a little bit about the apprentice program with the Pack Stock Center of Excellence. It sounds like it could be a really great opportunity for folks to engage with the program that are interested in pack stock. Can one of you help explain how that program works and let folks know how they could apply?
I'll take that one, Togan. Yeah, every year we're looking for apprenticeship program. The two northern forests, which would be the Klamath and the Shasta-Trinity, as well as two apprenticeship positions on the Inyo. Probably, I'd say the best way is just to go into USA Jobs
and it should be posted in there under Animal Packers Wage Grade 5. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that apply for those positions, they are unable to, the jobs fly in October, which is the problem that we generally have, because most of those people that want to apply for that job are usually working in October. So you really have to pay attention to when those announcements come out. And they're usually only 7 days, at least the one on the Inyo was only 7 days last year. I'm not sure on the North. But you're very limited time. You have to get in there. And then once you're accepted in the USA job certificate, those jobs will then be, those announcement certificates will be sent to the forests that are requesting those positions. And then we'll review them and do interviews and see how it works out with each of them. But the main thing is to make sure you look for those positions being flown in September and October. I don't know what time this year it's going to be.
Yeah, I guess I would add, and I think Katy has something to add as well. I know that Katy is one of our success stories for the center, and that she started as an apprentice and is now a full-time employee working with the program. I guess I would also add, and I'll post in the chat to add on to what Michael said, is that if folks are interested in the apprentice program, they can certainly email the Packstock Center of Excellence has an email address, and let us know that you're interested in those positions. So when those positions do open on USA Jobs, we do our best to make sure folks know when that does happen. And Katy, I'll turn it over to you to elaborate.
Just a couple things to add to what Michael and Togan said. Most of those apprenticeship positions are a wage grade 5 animal packer. There's 2 positions located on the Inyo, one on the Shasta-T with myself and Ken, and one on the Klamath National Forest. We have been flying the Shasta-Trinity position as a GS-4 or 5. So if you don't have a lot of stock experience, but have a lot of other natural resources experience, you're more likely to qualify for the forestry technician series than for the animal packer series. And we'd be happy to review your application. Additionally, email the PSCOE email address. I keep a list of people also that have contacted me about the apprenticeship and let them know when those jobs fly. And then feel free to reach out, if there's a particular forest that you want to work on out of those 3, feel free to reach out to the packers there directly that would be your supervisors, and just see what the job would entail and how to make yourself a more competitive applicant.
And I'd like to go back to that other question for a second. On about which ones are not acceptable. My suggestion would be get a hold of, I don't know where this person is located, but hunt up somebody that, in this case, Michael or myself, and we can either get somebody close to you that has knowledge about stuff. You'll be surprised at what the wide variety of things are that you can do with stock, especially if you're not familiar with it. So I highly suggest you find somebody with knowledge and go from there.
Great, thanks for that, Ken.
I'd like to add one more thing to that, Togan, too. As far as an application for projects, it doesn't just include trail work. It also opportunities for educational programs that we can put on. We do that for a lot of youth organizations here on the Inyo, and they do the same up on the Shasta-Trinity and the Klamath. Also, the other thing is special events. People are celebrating some, could be the 100-year centennial or something like that, and they would like to see a string of mules possibly in a parade. That's also an opportunity to apply for that as well. So it's not just limited to trail work. There's a lot of other things we can do and provide for the region and outside the region.
And I guess one of the other functions of the center, beyond community engagement and supporting project work, is education. And I know we have Debbie here on the panel, and Debbie's very engaged with the education program for the center. Debbie, can you share a little bit about what some of those resources might be?
Sure. We have pretty much worked up a 3-day program that starts with very, very basic animal behavior and human behavior and how those two things tie together to encompass all aspects of safely using pack stock or working around pack stock. And then the course progresses to actually giving people an introduction to very hands-on working with saddle animals, what to look for with safety on the equipment, and then progresses to teaches them some basic hitches, and then culminates with the final day of taking a little ride where we have pack stock and learn how to tie them up when we're stopping, and kind of incorporates everything that they've learned in the first 2 days. We have been contacted by other forests outside of the Inyo and outside of the region to put those on, and we will be teaching a class on the Humboldt Toyabe in about 2 weeks. We just finished our second class here on the Inyo for firefighters that are interested in joining our packing modules and working with us on fires. And so it's been a very successful education program, and we're getting the word out there as far as the capabilities as well as the safety aspects, and teaching more people how to safely work around pack stock.
Great, thanks, Debbie. And we have a comment in the chat from someone who has been a past participant that highly recommends the course. What's the best way for folks to hear about courses that the Pack Stock Center of Excellence might be offering? I guess in addition to emailing the shared inbox that we posted in the chat, how do you recommend they hear about those classes?
I would say reach out to Michael or Ken or myself, and then we can kind of see what they are interested in doing, and we can share what our capabilities are and see if we can make that fit and match what they're looking for.
Great, thanks, Debbie. We have another question in the chat. What's the typical length of service for a mule or horse, and where do they go when they're retired? Who'd like to take that one?
Well, I can speak to the Inyo. We generally are working mules, and horses have a time span. They'll work as late as some of the mules up to the age of 30, some of the horses into their mid-20s, and for most of our animals, then we go into semi-retirement. We work them a little bit less. Whether we still keep working when they're fully retired, then they'll just stay on the forest. We are fortunate to have pasture areas that we can keep them in year round, and they basically retire, especially if they put in 20 years of service or 25 years of service. We like to take care of them.
And I can say the same thing on the Sierra. I've utilized a number of my older mules that are really solid, gentle animals. And I work with a lot of FFA kids in the natural resources competition programs. And so these really gentle, nice, solid animals are a really good asset for these programs. And we've also donated some to a local junior college that has a packing course. And so I think there's a great opportunity to place these animals in good homes where they can still continue to be useful, but they're no longer asked to do the hard work that we need them to be able to do.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same up here, except for we probably try to find some outside places a little bit more, kind of like Debbie's doing, for our retirees as much as we can. That's not always possible, so some of them hang out in retirement. But yeah, various amounts of time for their working life. Some of them hold up and go for a long time. Some of them don't go quite as long.
It's been great to have this opportunity to have all of you here to answer questions. I'd like to thank the Pack Stock Center of Excellence and all of you for attending today.